Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the first decan of Pisces. I am joined here by my good friend and partner, friends with benefits, Tanja Andrews.
You might even say we're like besties,
Besties.
best friends. Hey, everybody.
So we're going to try to get through this without too many inside jokes. Tanya's here from inside the house in a separate room, so we're going to be a little silly today. But welcome all of you. We're gonna talk, new moon in Pisces, first decan of Pisces. We're gonna talk astrological magic today. We're gonna talk about Jupiter. We're gonna talk about David Bowie, the Labyrinth, the Matrix, all of these interesting things. So buckle in for a few hours and let's go on a journey together. Tanja, before we introduce you, I'm going to welcome a few friends into the chat. Sound good?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of friendly, familiar names in there.
I love this community that we're building here today. Rachel Fletcher is joining us from Roanoke, Virginia. Hello, friend. Raven Gray is here from Kansas. Hello, Raven. Creating Harmony is here from, I think that's Khadijah, here from Louisiana.
I think so.
Elizabeth Roth is here. Said, just watched your tarot and the stars class on Nightlight Astrology. Loved it. All right. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome. I know we're going to have some first timers here today, so we try to keep things a little casual here. So any questions that you have, just put them in the chat box. If you have comments, I love reading your comments, and it's just one nice get together that we have going on. So welcome, Elizabeth. Katrina is here from Queens, New York. Katrina is another name I'm recognizing from the webinar, I think. So yeah, I recently did a webinar for Nightlight Astrology, Tanja, and you know this.
I was there. It was really good.
It's talking about how to use tarot as a storytelling device for astrology. And that talk is still up at Nightlight Astrology until Sunday. And then it will be in my store. So if you want to catch that for free for the next couple of days, you can. Otherwise, you can purchase it along with the slides at my store at spencermichaud.com. So we went about 2.5, 3 hours, really went into depth with it. And I think it was a really fun talk, and we had really some nice questions and whatnot. And if I haven't answered your questions yet, if you sent me an email, I'm getting to it, getting through a backlog of stuff. So we have a few more friends. Tanja Sandgrape Thomas is here from Kentucky. Hello, friend. Lynn is joining us from Vermont. Hello, Lynn McMillan. Tarja is here from Finland, and Laura is here from Vancouver, Washington. Very cool. Well, thank you, friends, for joining us here today. And it is so exciting to see all of you and to be able to share with you today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you, if you are unfamiliar, my beautiful partner in crime here today. This is Tanja Andrews. Tanja, why don't you tell the folks that don't know you a little bit about yourself and some of your interests?
Yeah, I am kind of a magical type from the way back. I've been practicing conjure for, oh my gosh, like 20 years now. Maybe a little bit longer. So I've done a lot of kind of things with root work, which is the African-American folk magic tradition. And I recently started incorporating astrological magic and elections in several years ago, as that all kind of like started to really bubble up and become something that was more accessible to people. So I love working with that. I've loved astrology like forever. I'm like an OG with astrology, from like high school, because we all had that like Linda Goodman's like love science book. And anytime there was a guy or a gal that you wanted to know more about, because you were like, oh, like, you were just like trying to compare like only your sun signs, and it was so limited and terrible. So I love kind of all the ways that astrology just keeps expanding in terms of the ways that you can learn about yourself and other people, and just really kind of connect these different facets of kind of who you are. And kind of the information that continues to come out about it is just really, really exciting to me. So those are some things that I'm really passionate about. I also like foraging for mushrooms and scampering through the underbrush. I'm also a very enthusiastic cook. And so I use a lot of magical things.
I'm the main beneficiary of that.
You are. It's we got the Taurus moon food love connection.
Yeah.
Going strong. Yeah, so that's something that I really
tell people your sun, moon, rising here. So
my big three.
Yeah.
Sagittarius sun, don't hate. Capricorn rising, and Taurus moon.
Yes, we definitely connect with the Taurus moon. Scampering through the woods, eating delicious food,
That's right.
being comfortable, watching some good, TV and movies and things like
Yep.
that. And
Little fantasy movie fandom, which we'll probably talk a little bit about today as we kind of go into the whole Pisces effect.
for sure, for sure. And you have a very interesting astrological based and magic and hoodoo based business that you've been working
Mhm.
very hard at and expanding. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business?
Yeah, my hobby of astrological magic and conjure kind of merging together just got out of control, and so I turned it into a business. It's called Third Coast Mojo, and there I have an assortment of astrologically elected products, including oils, herb blends, powders, baths. And so I have things for different astrological elections: Jupiter in Pisces, Venus in Taurus, Venus in Libra. I've got some Mars and Scorpio things and a few kind of other things in there. So if people are interested in kind of like, connecting with that magic, I love to encourage people to do things themselves, but if you can't, then store bought is fine. And I have a store.
So where can we find this fabulous store of yours, Tanya?
thirdcoastmojo.com.
Okay, so we've got thirdcoastmojo.com. We have Third Coast Mojo on Etsy. Do you have anything new in the works, my friend?
I do. Decided to start offering custom blends because I'm getting people who are asking about different ways to work with me, or they want something that's like not quite in the shop. And so I wanted to create an option for people to kind of put in their info and tell me what they want, give me their birth chart, and I'll make them a special little custom blend like this. So it'll come in this nice, big, beautiful gem cut jar, and I will have kind of we can go back and forth a little bit, and I'll do a custom blend for people. And that is something that just came up on my shop today. I'm very excited to start working directly with people to kind of connect them with these magical goodies.
I love that. I love the customization of something like that. I've been the beneficiary of getting to test out Tanya's wonderful oils firsthand, fresh off the altar.
That's right. That's right. You're my best test subject. You're my lucky guinea pig.
So I'm slathering in all of these right now. I've got some stuff from you. I've got some stuff from Sphere and Sundry. I mean, it's good to support all these
Beautiful.
wonderful magical
Yeah.
practitioners. You have some Pisces stuff too that you've been working on, right?
Yep. I did a bunch of things for Venus and Pisces back when Venus and Jupiter were there together, which was just this really beautiful, beautiful aspect. And I loved it because it's so great to be able to have the planet in exaltation and have the Lord of that domain also just doing really hot and having them kind of aspecting each other. So it's like they're together, they're synergizing. It just creates this really ideal magical condition. And I'm just loving how well the things that I made are working with that. I made a Venus, like kind of a straight Venus in Pisces at that election. And I also made a batch of my Come to Me oil, which is kind of a classic conjure formulation that's designed to kind of be really manifestation oriented. It can be used to kind of like draw love to you, like to kind of like draw things to you that you're looking for, to kind of just open you to possibilities, to just kind of bring up a lot of like that kind of self-love and like be a really affirming and supportive and kind of alluring blend. And it just works so good. It's so good with
It
that,
does. It does
Venus
work.
and Pisces.
Like
Can you tell people about your
yeah.
win?
I entered a tarot deck giveaway a few weeks ago, and I slathered myself in
I'm so
Tanya's
geeked about that.
come to me oil, and I was one of the two winners. There was like 100 or so entries, and I just feel so very fortunate to have won that deck. It's a really cool deck. I believe that the user created Kickstarter is Urania Press. I believe her name is Natisha. Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting her last name, but she creates these wonderful tarot decks. Urania Press on Instagram. So follow her, check it out. She has this deck coming out that has constellations, and it's like a reprint of an ancient, like a more I don't know what is. I was going to say an ancient deck, but it's probably like 100 or 200 years old. I don't know. It's not that old, but
Vintage.
Vintage. There you go. That's the word. Thank you. For those of you that don't know, Tanya has Mercury in the first house in a mutual reception with Saturn in the ninth house. So
Everything's retrograde though. It comes and goes.
she has a really interesting way of both remembering important words, but also like creating words. So if you hear some things that you have never heard before in your life, it's because she's got that interesting
It's
mercurial
it's
thing
either
going
a word that like no one uses anymore or I made it up.
on. Nice, nice. So yeah, it was yeah, I was really pleased to be able to be the beneficiary of that, and really excited about that deck. And um, now my mission is to have one of these out of stock hoodie colors come to me.
Manifest it, bring it into your life. Yeah, so that's the nice thing about that type of oil blend. That kind of conjure come to me tradition is really useful for kind of bringing things to you. I've also had friends and other people that I've given this oil to, and they've used it to like manifest jobs, to manifest money, to manifest, boyfriends, girlfriends, things like that. So it's like if there's something that your heart is kind of hungering for, like it's good for kind of opening you up to it and kind of like tweaking the possibilities that you're connecting with to help bring things to you. So it's just like, it's not like going to make him come back. Like if he dumped you and you're like, I think that we're going to work it out. Like, no, this isn't something that's going to like control another person's mind or completely subvert someone else's will, but it is going to kind of nudge things in your favor and kind of bring you good things. So I think too, when it comes to things like love magic, and especially as we're kind of heading into this like heavily Piscean season where there's just going to be this huge emphasis on Pisces, we're all going to be tempted to kind of get lost in illusions or to be like, oh, like, maybe things can magically be different. And there's some things where you can do things and there's some things where you can't. Like you can't just like completely bend someone to your will without doing a whole lot of other things. And that's not what this is for, really. But it's like, if you're in a situation where it's like he's just not that into you, like this isn't going to magically change it. However, if someone isn't that into you, there's someone out there who is. There's someone out there who would like love to cherish you and like shower you with blessings. And this is the sort of thing where it's like it's going to kind of nudge the little possibilities and kind of like send you down that side street or like have you show up at that coffee shop when that person like who could really like be that person for you might be there, or when that job opportunity might really be there. And so the thing that I love to use magic for is to kind of like you're going to roll like a bigger die, it's like you'll have that like 20-sided dice instead of like a 6. And so it's like it's going to just kind of change the possibilities a little bit, little D&D flavor. We've been on this D&D
Can you tell we've been watching Critical
Vox,
Roles, the Legend of
Vox Machina. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like you can't completely like change everything, but you can change the possibilities a little bit. And I feel like astrological magic and conjure and these things are really useful for kind of just giving you a few more possibilities and kind of like nudging the odds in your favor a little bit, or kind of causing you to zig when you might otherwise zag.
I mean,
And
sounds like a magnet to me, like where you can get magnetized to the things that are attracted to your particular pole, and it may even drive away the things that aren't really meant for you as well. So I mean, I think that's just a little bit of extra boost for manifestation magic. I love it.
For sure. Yeah.
And the custom blend thing sounds like a really cool idea. I know that's something, a passion I've been watching develop within you, as far as like your development of understanding of scent and of perfuming and of the astrologically based herbs and things of that nature. I think Tanya is a really great scholar when it comes to these things as well. This is something that we really connect on, is our shared love of being able to dive into depth with the history of things and just really do things in a way that is thorough and I don't know, joyful. So I'm appreciating that journey that you've been going on.
It's nice to have a partner. Like when I wake up at like 3 a.m. and I'm like, hey, do you think that allspice is ruled by Jupiter or Mars?
Or when this like a whole entire room of our house is like just covered in like oils and candles and jars and crystals. It's like, we can't disturb that room. The Saturn ritual is baking a little bit longer.
That's right. It is. It's Saturn's room now.
Right. Speaking of that, we just had a Saturn Cazimi, didn't we? We had a Saturn Cazimi yesterday.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yeah. Did you feel it?
How are you feeling? I was feeling it. I'm feeling a little better today. I was feeling a little heavy yesterday. I was feeling like I think that with the Saturn Cazimi, you see the Saturn going into the heart of the sun and the dross being burned away. And it felt like that. It felt like it was like, being like this purification energy. And I feel really good today. I do want to shout out Sphere and Sundry too. I've been, I'm starting to use their Antares oil that just released, which is a spicy meatball.
You've been raging. You've been like,
I've been
just,
rage cleaning and rage organizing.
yes,
Like,
yes.
so
Just like everything is extremely high energy.
yeah. So I've been, it's very good for, achieving a goal or being able to like, move towards something that's important to you. So, I think there's room for multiple practitioners in this field, and I
Oh,
really love their stuff
100%.
too. So
Yeah, yeah. So much skill and expertise. Nothing but love for them.
so Tanya, let's
Mhm.
take a look. Let's start diving into some of the astrology. Actually, one more little sales pitch before we dive into it. For those of you who were at the webinar, thank you so much for attending the Nightlight Astrology webinar. Again, you can watch that for free if you missed it until Sunday, the February the 19th. And then it is going to go into my store for purchase, and you can get the slides along with the recording after that date, hopefully. The other thing I wanted to say is that I made the Decans of Pisces webinar, the sale, available a few days early. Since I knew we were going to come on here, I wanted to make sure that if you wanted to get a jump on the Decans of Pisces, that you could purchase that. So there's a day or so left to get the Decans of Aquarius for 20% off, and now you can get the Decans of Pisces off as well. Those webinars, the consolidation of all the studying and knowledge that I've been trying to cultivate and channel through these studies for the last I don't know, it's almost 4 years now. So there's mythology, there's tarot, there is fixed stars. We talk about oh my goodness, we go over all these different
Myths.
the myths. Yes, we go over all these different pathways and explorations, and they're about 2.5 to 3 hours long each. You can get Decan flashcards, digital Decan flashcards to help you learn some of the correspondences with each of the Decans or 10-degree sections. So check that out. That's in the store. I also wanted to guide you to Tanya's email list. For creators now, the best thing that you can do if you want to support them is to sign up for their email list. And if you're not on the Spencer Michaud email list, you should sign up for that right now to know when we're doing live streams and classes and things like that. I'm doing guided group study classes. There will be one that is going to launch in the spring for this book, The Flowering Wand by Sophie Strand. We're going to be kind of looking at mythic mycelium and how myths erupt from different time and space and how they're connected over time. I'm really excited about this. That'll be available in the coming weeks. But also, Tanya has an email list as well. So if you want to know when new oils are coming out, when new classes, when she's going to start teaching classes, sign up for that as well. There's a link to that in the description of this video here. And that's where you can get all of the news that you need.
You'll also get a coupon.
Oh, yes, that's right. Sign up for the email list, get a coupon. Yes.
From a shop. Yeah. I wanted to say, I've been reading Sophie Strand's Substack. Sure, her writing is just gorgeous.
She's great.
Just really, really cool. Beautiful stuff. Like that book seems like it's going to be really awesome.
It reminds me a lot of my friend Stephanie Warner, who was on the show at a Gemini new moon, who's also a really incredible writer. Their styles seem to be very complementary. Both of them really, really intelligent folks and able to describe things in just a really beautiful, magical way. So, support Sophie Strand, get the book, sign up for the email list. Let's do some astrology. What do you say, folks?
Woo!
All right. So yes, if you are new, make sure you hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to make a material donation to the work that we're doing here today, there's a little $sign in the chat that's called a super chat or super sticker, or you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. Tanya, let's talk Pisces. Let's first of all, big picture thoughts before we bring the chart up. What are some of your Piscean experiences?
I mean, really kind of the cosmic oneness, just a lot of like good fortune, the ocean, all these kind of things. I think too, one of the things that I feel like Pisces is another one of those signs that's often really mischaracterized in contemporary astrology, because people are like, oh, Pisceans are like these soft, wishy-washy people. And it's like, Pisceans are very blessed, and they have that like tenacity of like a spawning salmon that's like going like up against the current of the river. Like,
Right.
don't underestimate Pisceans. There's a side of them where it's like they do not care what happens to them. They are
Yeah.
going where they're going with this. Like, they have a lot of spiritual drive and just this really kind of deep like faith that kind of like empowers them to do some really interesting things. Like, I've had the pleasure of knowing a lot of Pisceans in my life who are like independent business owners, and so they have this kind of like Jupiterian like blessed state where it's like they're good. They're not bad with money. Like, they're not bad with like the material world, but they're also really connected with the spiritual world. And you put those two things together and it makes them kind of weirdly unstoppable. And so I
Yeah.
feel like those energies are something that is really great to be able to kind of tap into when there's a lot of strong aspects with Pisces.
So being a Jupiterian native yourself, and forgive me for bouncing around here. I actually did receive
It's your new bouncy chair. You're just like
my
boinky boink.
my office chair, which is like a combination of a chair and like a medicine ball. So if you see me like doing this, that's what's going on.
It's Spencer's kinetic energy chair.
Yeah, which is needed. So Tanya, being a Jupiterian native yourself, a Sagittarius Sun and Venus, what are some of the ways that you see Sagittarius, the yang sign, being different from Pisces, the yin sign of Jupiter?
I feel like with Pisces, it's like a spiritual physical dichotomy that's being brought together, and with Sagittarius I feel like it's like a philosophical or like a mental and physical dichotomy. Like, I feel like Sagittarius is very thoughtful and very wise and has kind of a lot of potential to kind of like have these really deep philosophical and kind of like justice and like this view on kind of how things should be, like kind of from like a logical and almost like masculine energy standpoint, that yang energy where it's like outward focused, like, what am I doing out in the world, like where am I aiming my arrows, like what am I going towards with this kind of like very aggressive kind of horse-like drive. And I feel like with Pisces it's more spiritual, like those things are coming from like the inside, where it's like the motivation is very inner and very spiritual, and kind of like they're taking things in, and like that's where that kind of outgrowth is coming from. So I feel like there's kind of like an inner outer in terms of the motivation, and kind of like a mental spiritual kind of divergence. And not to say that there's not overlap between those two things, but I feel like those are kind of the differences when I kind of think about how that energy is manifesting.
Yeah. And, it's fascinating to think about both of those signs as double-bodied or mutable signs that are transitions between the seasons. So with Sagittarius, we've got the last sign of fall as we're trying to get to the return of the light at the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. So a try to get to the finish line type of experience.
Yeah,
this is what I've
that's
noticed
real.
with you. You're a third decan Sagittarius sun, right?
Carrying the sticks.
Right. And we talk about that on this channel with the 10 of Wands, with carrying the weight of responsibilities to get to a final goal. I'm trying to find that card in here. What do you think about how do you manage those responsibilities?
I don't. Let's be clear about that.
Here's the decan that we're talking about here, the 10 of Wands decan, where we're carrying something to the finish line to be able to get to either a period of rest, to a period of return of the light. It just feels like these heavy burdens that we're working with. Whereas when we get to the Piscean decans, to me, we're looking at something where we're aspiring towards the spring equinox, which is a point of balance, but also of a point of ascension as well. And here we're going to be talking today about this 8 of Cups card in particular. You can see in these 3 decans, Tanya, we've got 8 of Cups, 9 of Cups, and 10 of Cups for Pisces. We're trying to get to that, I guess, that magical good. End of the rainbow experience. Which is temporary.
Nice.
It's temporary, by the way, right? Temporary. So, I see that as I like what you were saying about, unifying, intention, trying to hit the target, right, with the Sagittarius, where we're unifying body and spirit. And I think one thing I would add, maybe, and you can maybe confirm or deny this, but learning through experience, I think is
Mhm.
a Sagittarian archetype, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, this is a journey.
right, right, where we're going out and we're learning by doing. And I think
Mhm.
that the Piscean difference with that on some level is we're learning by going off into an internal intuitive
Mhm.
state
Mhm.
and, trying to find we're always trying to find our why in these
Mhm.
Jupiterian signs. But I feel like there's almost like an escapism from material reality with these Piscean decans as well, where sometimes we need to take a time out, we need to take a break.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
how do you see Pisces in relationship to like retreating from the world on some level?
Sure. I mean, I think that's part of kind of that meditative energy where things like insights will come to you kind of spontaneously. Like when you clear out your mind or when you're just really able to be still for a second, that's when these really powerful and beautiful insights can kind of come to you. And it's harder to get that type of vision when you're just really like running all over the place and like go, 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 or you're just bouncing on your chair and you can't stop. But I think like there's something to be said, like there's different kinds of insights. There's insights that you can get from life and from kind of really getting in the mix with things and connecting with people and just kind of opening yourself to that oracular zone that's out in the world. And there's also insights that you can get that are really powerful that come from just really calming your mind and finding that kind of still small voice within. And so there's kind of two pathways that you can take to get really like valuable intuitive information. And like it's like the inner versus the outer. And I
Right.
think that those are kind of that's another kind of dichotomy that you can see between those two signs.
Yeah, yeah. I'm feeling. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling sort of the Eight of Cups uh, retreating energy starting to bubble up from my subconscious. Have you been feeling that lately in the collective? Is that
Little
something that
bit,
is coming around?
little dissatisfaction where you're just like, ah, is that all there is?
Right, right. So we're going to be dealing with a Saturn ruled decan in the beginning
Mhm.
of this new moon cycle. That's going to sort of prime the pump for the transition of Saturn into Pisces as well,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
is going to be one of the bigger transitions of 2023. Then Pluto is going to move into Aquarius later in the month of March. Um, so let's kind of take a look at the chart and let's start breaking it down. We'll talk more Piscean archetypes, but let's take a look at this chart and see what we've been dealing with here.
Mhm.
So any big picture thoughts about just the chart of this new moon in particular that are cropping up, Tanya, for you?
I think it's really interesting that we are getting this really like beautiful kind of clean new moon right at the beginning of Pisces, kind of right as Venus is about to like fall out and have that kind of big dignity drop. And also that it's kind of like happening like in kind of like this cycle, like right before Saturn is going to go into Pisces. And so it feels like there's those kind of those two ingresses are going to feel really significant for kind of how this is going to play out. I think like I feel like this is a moment when it's like one thing is kind of wrapping up and there's another thing that's on the horizon, and I feel like there's just going to be this really interesting kind of transition that's going to become more apparent over the next 2 weeks. So I feel like between now and the full moon there's going to be some kind of things that people are going to start to really have come to light, especially after that Saturn Kazemi. So it's like
Yeah.
the sun and Saturn come together, and then that moon chimes on it again. And so like there's some point in your life where it's like this is a point to kind of like look at, because there's things that are going to start coming around and like hitting it, and there's going to be these cycles of kind of transformation. And this is kind of a moment where we'll look back on and be like, oh yeah, that's when I started to see that coming up.
Yeah, that Saturn Kazemi was a pretty big moment, for February.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the way that I've been thinking about Saturn and Jupiter comes from Charles Obert, who wrote a book on the seven classical planets, and he talks about Saturn as potentially providing the blueprint that Jupiter can create into multiplicity or into form. So,
Mm-hmm.
Saturn being a planet of boundaries and limitations shows us what potentially could be possible, the limits of what is possible. And Jupiter, I've been using the metaphor lately of the platonic form of a horse being related to Saturn, and then Jupiter
Mm-hmm.
being able to beget the multiplicity of forms into reality. We see that in
Mm-hmm.
the myths of Zeus as well, where Zeus is has many paramours. he's
I
he's
mean,
he's spicy.
that's right. It's romance time.
Romance time. That's right. So, I would encourage those of you out there to think about some of the visions that came up over the course of the last week, especially as Saturn was moving into that Cazimi position. And you can see here that the sun, by this new moon on Monday, oh, that's nice. That's an opportunity, isn't it?
New
New
moon
moon
on
on Monday. There you go. Yes,
You know,
exactly. I always wait for that opportunity to use that
it's a good
Duran
one.
song. So you can see that the sun has started to separate from Saturn. And, we get a new directive, we get a new blueprint, we get a new structure that we want to build from with the Saturn Cazimi potentially. And as the sun separates from Saturn, Saturn is starting to progress in the zodiac to become a morning star, which is actually a rejoicing condition for Saturn. It prefers to be ahead of the sun, in rise before the sun in the sky, because then it heats up the cold a little bit and mitigates some of the malefic nature of Saturn. So you might be seeing Saturn starting to, quote unquote, rise from its sickbed, right? Maybe some of the structures in your life have started to crumble and new ones have started to take their place. And you'll probably see a manifestation of that as the sun separates, and separates by about 15 degrees or so. You might see the new structure of your life in place. And I think this new moon in Pisces is really, we know some of the new rational mental structures in life, but now we have to feel our way through it. We have to feel like, well, why are we going to do that? What is our motivations, right, for doing this? What is our internal motivations? What is the internal narrative and story and myth that we are going to tell ourselves to get us through to whatever the next manifestation period is? Let me ask you this, Tanja. One of the things that comes up with the first decan of Pisces, which again is a Saturn-ruled decan. We go in the Pisces decans, we go Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. Where have you felt those periods of dissatisfaction? And tell me more about, if you have, I'm sure that we all have on some level.
Yeah, it's a human experience.
What types of breakthroughs has that led to? How do you get through those periods? What are some ways that you utilize that feeling of discontent to be able to move forward towards potential manifestation later?
Yeah, I think that anytime you're trying to kind of build something new into your life, there's going to be that kind of like magical dark night of the soul, where it's like you're going to just be like, oh, like in the space between making the wish and it coming true, or kind of like the next steps to get to it becoming clear, you have kind of a crisis of faith. And I think that it's times like that when it's like you have to kind of really get centered with yourself and kind of find ways to stay engaged with what means the most to you and what brings meaning into your life and what brings you solace and joy. And I think that especially in these times, it's so radical to be like, I need a rest. Like, I feel like there's so many people, this is a thing that I see a lot of people struggling with too, is like, we're all kind of just chronically on the edge of burnout, where it's like, there's so much pressure to just go, and do, and just always be earning and always be hustling. And it's like glorifying hustle culture. And I feel like I'm seeing like all those memes where it's like, stop glorifying hustle culture and start glorifying whatever this is. And it's like a picture of like a mouse in overalls with like a little tea kettle. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Like Fritz from the guy who's up north and makes those videos of him cooking in the woods.
Hey, buddy.
Hey there, buddy.
Yeah. And I think
old time hockey. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I think like taking time to kind of like go within and time to nurture yourself and time to kind of reconnect with what soothes you and kind of what brings you meaning, and kind of just to like have that space and really like think your thoughts and feel your feelings, because when there's so many external things and stressors happening, it can get really like it throws you off your center, and it's hard to kind of stay focused on kind of what you're doing and why, when there's just this kind of constant stream of like chaos and demands and frightening things and nonsense. Like there's so much nonsense. And I think that
Yeah.
being able to kind of unplug from that is deeply, deeply valuable. And this may be a really nice moment to kind of connect with that.
I like that. I've been, as you and I have been trying to expand what we do, both astrologically, magically, all of these things. Um, Sometimes it's hard to get that break, isn't it? When
Mhm.
you're, even if I'm what I would consider mostly self-employed, and it just feels like you're working all the time, and trying to get that space to come up with new ideas, or to be able to even just enjoy some successes every once in a while, feels hard to come by in this type of, like you said, hustle culture that we've started to, I don't know, manifest in our collective. I like that, the kind of the shutting the brain off to allow space to empty the cup out a little bit can really lead to maybe better manifestations, because we become centered. I'm thinking of this is funny. My favorite football quarterback, Mr. Well, I don't know if I can call him my favorite anymore, but
I
one
was
I've
going to say
supported for many
that's
years.
that's an interesting choice.
It's yeah, he's Aaron Rodgers is who I'm referring to. Those of
Oh,
you who
Ron.
those of you who have watched the Astrology of Sports on the Nightlight channel with me and Adam and Kip know that this have some mixed feelings about Aaron Rodgers and some of his, I guess, political beliefs recently. But he's going off into doing this darkness retreat, where it's
Oh,
a sensory deprivation room, basically, for 4 days. He's sitting in darkness. There's like a toilet in the middle of the room. Like, I was
I
just,
mean, you kind of lost me at the toilet in the middle of the room,
yeah.
but I was just like, how luxurious to
It
have
does
that
feel,
much
it does,
time.
it does. But it's like, oh, that sounds really nice. Just completely shutting off the brain, just really being with yourself rather than doing, I think is a very Piscean type of thing. So I feel like this new moon might be encouraging us to slow down, to just be rather than necessarily do, and release the conscious mind. Another thing I think about with this is um, the Star Wars, where Luke is trying to practice with his lightsaber, and he's overthinking things, and he finally has to just put on the blinders,
Hmm.
sensory deprivation, and just trust his instincts, trust the flow state.
Hmm.
And to me, this seems like a really pivotal moment for that, because the spring is a really important manifestation time. I think Aries season is when we just feel like, okay, it's go time. It's time to push the button. But before that has to happen, we need to have the space and clarity and rest for the new cycle that comes through. And to me, this really reflects the ninth house of the Thema Mundi that Pisces has the cusp on. This is something that I talked about in my tarot talk for Nightlight. But in the Thema Mundi, Cancer's on the ascendant, which will put Pisces in the ninth house. And this is really the time before action of the 10th house. So this was the sign that was on the 10th house before whatever is there now, like Aries in the Thema Mundi, right? So
Hmm.
we're trying to find our meaning. We could take pilgrimages, but maybe the pilgrimages are in our mind. Maybe the pilgrimages are going off into a fantasy world for a period of time, going off into the darkness for a period of time. Trying not to pee on yourself in a completely dark room while you're trying to hit the hole in the middle of the room. Like, things can get a little messy in Pisces season, right?
It's,
Like,
well, I mean, think about how here in Michigan, it's like mud season. Like
mhm.
every year we kind of be like, have that moment where we're like, oh, it's mud season again, because it's like you get the fool's spring when it's like things start to thaw, but it's like it's not like, it's just kind of this like wet mess. And it's like you're going through this time when it's things are really amorphous and really changeable, and you're kind of going back and forth sometimes between like, it's frozen solid and now it's wet and everything's a mess, and now it's dry and now it's cold and now it's getting warmer. And so there's just all these kind of like different phase state changes. And so there's
Sure.
just like so much mutability like in this moment. So it's a nice kind of hinge time when it's like there's a lot of potential to kind of change direction. But you do have to kind of like go into that magical dark and just kind of, come out on the other side one way or another.
Yeah, it's a shift of consciousness, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's difficult for me sometimes to think about any one particular space in the zodiac being a beginning or an ending. I think we have multiple places where we could consider that, but in one way of thinking about the solar year, we do have a new beginning of spring potentially in the northern hemisphere. And
Mhm.
as Tanya was mentioning, it is mud season. Everything is the snow is melting, the ice is melting. It's mixing with the earth to provide future fertility. So, if we think about that metaphorically, we need to start melting our rigid ideas of how things should be so that we can create from that primordial, ooze or space or oceanic collective consciousness. So that's something that I think about a lot with Pisces. I'm actually looking forward to maybe trying to disconnect a little bit during Pisces season. I always say try, and then I end up, committing to more things and doing more things, but we'll see, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so a couple people are commenting on Aaron Rodgers, the astrologer. Now, yeah, Aaron went on
Yeah.
a he went on with a pop astrologer named Deborah Silverman and did some kind of like astrology retreat online.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly the same kind of astrology that I practice, but it is kind of neat to see, someone like Aaron promote astrology.
Hmm.
Some of his other hot takes, I wish he wouldn't promote as much, but
Well,
people are,
he's on an interesting journey though in
yeah,
some ways, because it's like all his life he's been this very like physical kind of strategic being, where it's like as a quarter like a star quarterback, he's using his mind and he's using his body and kind of like bringing them together to like just focus on these goals and like, have this really like hard direction that he was just going in and just going and going and going. And now he's getting older and kind of reaching a pivoting point in his career, and he's starting to be like, hey, I'm doing the ayahuasca, like what's
yeah,
this astrology thing about? I'm going to go sit in the dark for 4 days and try and just figure my stuff out. Like,
sure,
it's interesting. Like, I don't always agree with the conclusions that he's coming up with, but I do kind of like seeing someone who's been this very like kind of out like idealistic like alpha dude going
yeah,
into this phase where he's like, what, like spirituality, what's this about, like the metaphysical, is there something here that can help me find some meaning or like help me think of what the next phase of my journey is going to be like? And that's interesting. you know
I agree,
I've
I
seen that
agree.
people are like Ross.
I mean, he's a Sagittarius, so he's a
Mm-hmm.
Jupiterian. He has a
Mm-hmm.
Sagittarius sun conjoining Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Taurus rising. He has a Scorpio moon, which I think leads to a lot of the conspiracy theory type of thinking that or
The
conclusions.
dissatisfaction, like.
Yeah, he gets a little paranoid. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
on Pat McAfee the other day, really just like taking reporters to task that were reporting on his intentions. He was like, "You don't know me. You're not in my inner circle," and like he was getting really like, aggressive about it. But
there's,
like,
there's a lot of feelings these days.
but
I think that
again,
may be
like,
another thing too, is like emotions seem like they're running really high lately.
yeah, and I was thinking about the we've been having this kind of uh, condition recently with malefic enclosures of particular planets. First we had Venus that went through a malefic enclosure where it made a trine to Mars, and then it was moving towards the conjunction with Saturn. And yes, it was a trine, so it might not have been like as bad as it could have been, but these planets still, I think, were under a little bit of duress. And then the sun has been going through that same condition, the trine to Mars, and then the conjunction with Saturn that finally, thankfully, ended yesterday. And we've been seeing, some various conflicts out in either in the world or even in the metaphysical world or the astrological world. And Mercury is going to be following that pattern throughout this lunar cycle too. So that's going to be happening. Oh, geez, what's that? It's around the 22nd of February. Mercury is going to be entering into that same condition. So,
Mhm.
you know, and what have we learned from it, right? Like sometimes I think that with this we had a trine with Mars where there was differing opinions, right? And a kind of like intellectual disagreements we've seen in the collective. And then finally we get to this point where it comes to an ending, it comes to like the Saturn point where, you know, we have to think about a new blueprint that we need to move forward with, that conjunction with Saturn. So I want you to pay attention, friends, as to, we just got done with the sun that rules Leo. So if you look at the Leo part of your chart, you may have been going through some of this tension with the malefic enclosure that finally you're getting relief from yesterday. Personally, and that's just a weird, dumb little thing, like this really coincided with my like hoodie odyssey. Tanya's been like witnessing this firsthand. I needed to replace this green hoodie that I had been wearing for like 30 years. And it was very much an emotional support hoodie. And I found a really nice one online. And instead of just stopping at finding the thing that I wanted, I was like, oh, these fit really nice. I want every single color that this company makes in this size. And then went on this obsessive odyssey to find some of the colors that I couldn't actually find online. And it really drove me crazy for a few weeks. And it finally ended yesterday with like, okay, I've got the colors I need. I'm going to send these other ones back. I'm done thinking about this. And I know that's a really mundane example, but I think it's just the stakes were slightly lower when I think, you know, you have a malefic enclosure that is through a trine than through one that might be a square. And to me, that feels like a little bit of a low stakes version of that. So what we're going to be on the lookout for is Mercury doing the same kind of movement when it makes the trine to Mars, and then it subsequently will be making the application to Saturn. And I want you all to really pay attention to the Gemini area of your life and the Virgo area of your life. Okay, so you might be feeling some stress or some tension in those areas of your life potentially. Tanja,
Yeah.
did you have any, you know, any experiences with this malefic enclosure? Sorry, I didn't.
I mean, I think it was a little bit vicarious because I was just watching you go through it. I feel like that with that Mars Gemini, it was this kind of like uncomfortable proliferation of options.
Yes.
That it was just like every one thing became two, and then the two became four, and then the four became eight. It was just like bloop, 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 bloop. So it's just this kind of like intense proliferation, or it's just like there's so many things and so many options just happening, like kind of with great speed. Like every time I came home, there was more hoodies.
You know, it is funny too, because your 8th house is Leo. So it was like the possessions or resources of your partner, which was me. And you were
just watching it.
Right? You were seeing this play out in my own head about like my adornments of how I'm going to adorn my body and things of that nature. And you're right. Like it was, this company makes like, oh my God, it's like fucking 30 different colors of the same thing. But there's like there's tiny little differences in the construction. Like the zipper isn't covered in some of them. And having a Virgo stellium, you'll get driven crazy by these tiny differences. I think what I really wanted was a uniform that was interchangeable with multiple colors. Debbie says the hoodie gremlin, don't add water. Yes, exactly.
100%.
Exactly. And I've started wearing the colors for the astrological day. So if you see me wear the green one a lot, it's probably just because I do most of my live streams on Friday, which is a color, Venusian color. But anyway,
after midnight,
right? And I think that we can go through these mental anguish kind of things, like what Mars in the second decan of Gemini. This is the 9 of swords energy, where you see a figure that is, you know, awake at night, having this nightmare of indecision, of, you know, I think trying to figure out all the options. I had a few nights like that, just trying to figure out this really dumb thing that shouldn't have been that important, but it felt more important to me. So I'm curious out there, for those of you in digital land, have you had any crisis of proliferation of options where you had to make a choice, where you were feeling really torn between decisions and options and directions that you could go forth with? And then finally, did you come to a stopping point with that when the sun hit Saturn? Because again, we're going to be going through this again with Mercury. So there's another choice point where Mercury is going to make that trine to Mars. There's going to be choices that are going to come up, and we're going to have to kind of work through it until we get to the conjunction with Saturn. And then Mercury is going to move into Pisces into its fall. So Yeah,
the double fall,
right. So
super
just
mega fall.
a challenging conjunction with Saturn and ending, but then Mercury going off into this like liminal, sometimes maybe even confused state or underwater state where communication may get a little more difficult. We're thinking more in metaphorical, figurative language terms rather than clear communication, which there can be some good advantages to that. For those of you who have Mercury in Pisces, it is a very poetic and storytelling and myth making position, but it can be difficult for some of the things that Mercury would normally be associated with, like commerce, exchanging resources, having clarity of exchange, and things of that nature. So I just wanted to like highlight that for this new moon cycle, because that to me is one of the bigger challenges we're going to be going through with this new moon. Because upon first blush, there's nothing super terrible, I think, about this new moon. Yes, we have a whole sign square to Mars, but again, I think this is going to be the tension between how can you eliminate distractions and a proliferation of options to be able to give yourself the time and space to go into that primordial water type of energy, the dark room, to be able to figure out what you want to do next. Because that's why Aaron Rodgers is doing this. He's trying to decide whether he wants to retire or keep playing football, which for him is a very big decision. So he's trying to remove all the noise that he's getting, because everyone's probably, you're that famous, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people's opinions. There's a lot of people contacting you. And he's just like, I'm going to shut all that off and see if I can figure out what's true in my heart and my imagination and what I want to manifest next. Right? Let me check the chat here, Tanya.
Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of people talking about how they're trying to narrow their choices or how they're facing kind of crossroads and different things like that. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think when there's a little bit of people that are kind of going back and forth about whether Ron elected this retreat, and it's possible that he did. Like when you're a celebrity and you're able to work with like different kinds of astrologers, like that's definitely an option. But also I think something that happens is that sometimes like elections kind of do you, where it's like there's just a time, and if it really like is hitting at an important part in your life, like it may be a moment when like something just really kind of poetically, metaphorically, literally kind of like syncs up, and it's like, oh yeah, like at this new moon, like I'm doing this retreat and like I'm going into darkness just as I'm, like the astrological elements all really line up to tell that same story. Right. And so I think sometimes you're going to see those things where it seems like a really literal manifestation of it. And it may be a choice, or it may just be kind of like the universe, like winking at you and being like, hey.
Yeah. Lynn was asking, do you think that he elected a time to go into that retreat? Honestly, Lynn, I think the answer is probably yes, because he's choosing a balsamic moon phase. I think he's going in either today or tomorrow. And he's choosing a balsamic moon so that he can get a new moon in Pisces. And he's working with an astrologer. So I wouldn't be surprised if he said, look, I'm going to take this Piscean time to figure this stuff out before, making the choice as, Aries season or something of that nature. Alley Cat is also pointing out kind of the ambiguity, the dual nature of Mercury that I think is a good point as well. I see that the Gemini house of Mercury, because Mercury definitely has that duality, the masculine and feminine duality, the yin and yang duality. I feel like there is a proliferation of options in Gemini for the specific purpose, though, of eliminating some of them. I mean, you see like we proliferate as we go through the decans, and finally the last decan of Gemini is the Ten of Swords, where you see like one twin dead on the ground, basically. That's it. Right? It's a sacrifice where you're exploring to get an idea of what choice that you want to make and eliminate. Whereas like Virgo, Virgo, I think that there is a consolidation of options to be able to beget something new into form, to pass on a legacy, to maybe store something for the winter, to pass it on to the next generation, to fuse matter and spirit together. So that's how I understand those two signs, and maybe the differences in Mercury's expression within them. Although it's all a spectrum, and like just because you have Gemini placements doesn't mean that you are always going to expand all of your options. Sometimes you may be having something in the third decan of Gemini where you really have a handle on eliminating some of the choices in front of you. Okay, let's see.
There's a little bit too about whether Saturn is masculine or feminine, and there's a little bit of mention somewhere back in there. I didn't read all of it, but it looked like there was kind of a thought like, oh, like, do you think of Saturn as feminine? And I would say for me, yes. I think of it as kind of a yin planet because it's so cool and slow and kind of that receptive energy. Like it's not like aggressive or hot or kind of like really going after things hard. So I think that if you're going to kind of think of it in those terms a little bit, there is definitely kind of like a yin energy with Saturn, especially in like if you think of like yin yoga, where it's like that yoga where you're just kind of like lying in like a single position and just really like sitting with the discomfort and trying to kind of relax into it. Like
Sure.
that kind of energy is very relevant to that. And I think that it's going to be very relevant, especially as we're seeing that particular planet having such a big transit into a completely new locale.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think that I want to point out that each of these planets, beyond potentially I don't know, I don't know if the sun would fit into this, like the planets of the extremes, but Saturn has both a yin and a yang domicile as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we can see more active Saturn and more yin Saturn. I would say in this decan of Pisces, it most definitely would be a more yin Saturn, just for the simple fact that we're in a very yin sign in Pisces, maybe even the most yin sign. I don't know if that's too big of a leap to make on some level, because it is very like it's mutable, double-bodied. We've got water. It's very receptive. Like one of the things that we were discussing before our talk here today was some of the movies that we love that are associated that really come in and pop into our minds. Did you ever pull up the charts of the two stars of the movie we were discussing?
Oh, I didn't. I was scampering around.
So if you're out in the chat, do us a favor, pull up David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly's charts and let us know if either one of them has a Saturn in Pisces. Because Tanya and I were discussing the 1986 classic, The Labyrinth. And we say that because this particular decan, let's stop the share for a second. We've got this decan in Austin Coppock's 36 Faces book is called The Labyrinth in that book. And he talks a lot about being able to go internal to find the demiurge or the demiurgos, and really exploring the way that we create our own personal myths and narratives, and whether they're a palace or a prison, and being able to use that dissatisfaction to leave behind the outer reality to go back in to reconnect with a spiritual purpose or with a spiritual oneness or unity. I want to hear more about your thoughts about that movie, because honestly, if I really think about this movie now, the connections with this decan are very interesting. And so give us your I don't know, how old were you when this came out? You're like
what is math? What is time?
You were like 9 or 10 when this came out.
Like, yeah, I was a kid. Like yeah. I was young enough to be like intrigued and frightened by it, like, which I think is kind of the perfect and appropriate response to a particular film.
Well, those movies in general, right? Like just any of those Jim Henson mid 80s movies were fascinating and magical, but also super scary at the same time.
Yeah,
I was scarred by that
so for
Dark
people
Crystal movie.
For people who are like babies and may not remember this is a movie that came out in the 80s. It's the story of like a young teenage girl who's babysitting her stepbrother, and you know, her parents are like going out and like she's like, oh, like I'm, you know, she has this kind of story about herself where it's like, oh, I'm so put upon, like I'm like the princess in a story who's babysitting her evil, spoiled stepbrother.
Her own myth, her own internal myth.
Yeah, she's going through this kind of like myth thing where she's just like, oh, and then, you know, she's like, I wish the goblins would take the baby away right now. And then all these like puppet goblins like come, and they do. And so like it's, the movie is like this mix of like human actors, including Jennifer Connelly, and of incredibly charismatic and, you know, just mind-blowing performance by David Bowie,
Right.
as
And
Jareth,
his
the goblin,
his
as the
cod
Goblin
piece
King.
and
Yes. So he's wearing these like,
his crystal balls.
he's got this like big Tina Turner hair and this like
Yeah.
swath of eye makeup and these like tight pants, and he's like singing and dancing while completely surrounded by this like terrifying and like comical but like really bizarre assortment of like goblin puppets.
Right.
And so like, and he's got this baby, and he's like, I'm going to keep this baby unless you come through the labyrinth and rescue him. And so the girl goes on the journey and makes friends along the way. And so it's kind of her like descending really deeply into illusion and into this like story where, is she going to be the hero, or is she going to be kind of like swept up in this like is it a romance, is it being a trap? And so there's all these things where there's so many questions of like, what's the nature of reality? What am I really looking at? Is it a wall? Is it a door? Like, which is funny because that's what I think Galley Cat was saying in the chat. Like, what am I seeing? Is it, where am I? Like, what's my environment? Where am I going? And so it's kind of a really interesting thing to kind of think about in terms of this story, because it's like she comes through on the other side, and I guess no spoilers, but she finds her power and like,
I mean, if they haven't seen it by now,
I mean, I guess
it's what, 40 years old now.
I mean, it's also like it's a movie like with puppets and like actors, like it ends fine, everyone's fine.
Spoilers, she gets the baby back.
Spoilers, she gets the baby back. I mean, I guess, wouldn't it be terrifying if she didn't? Like if the whole movie like just ended completely differently, and she was like, you know what, I am gonna be your evil goblin queen, and you can have my brother. I didn't like him anyway.
Right. Well, I mean, then it would be like American Horror Story or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be
it was a simpler time in the mid 80s, friends. You know, things were scary, but they're, you know, hopefully it worked out. Or like it becomes like the Aronofsky, is that, what was his name? Darren Aronofsky or something like that. Requiem for a Dream.
Oh, yeah, no.
Jennifer Connelly's gone on quite a journey in her.
She really has. She really has. But yeah, so I mean, I think that's kind of the thing too. Like at this point, like in that decade, you may be going through your own like Jennifer Connelly, like Labyrinth adventure. And I think too, like with that movie, you know, for me personally, like it was kind of like in a way, like it was like, oh my gosh, like a man can be like David Bowie, like glorious, like, you know, puppets can be like people, like walls can talk, like it's just, it kind of like, it's sort of mind blowing, and it's showing these kind of like really unusual forms that things can take, and the kind of like fantastical like self-expression like of kind of the artists who made it, and kind of like there's like songs in it, and like there's all kinds of things. And so this may be a time too when it's like, as Saturn goes into Pisces and as this new moon is hitting, this is a really interesting time to kind of connect with your creativity and maybe find something where it's like you can go deep into it, like you can kind of find you know, just like new inspiration in the kind of liminal and the transgressive and kind of the spiritual and metaphysical. Like I feel like we're going to just see a lot of like really amazing fantasy kind of coming to life as people kind of express their creativity, and as people long for like an escape too. Like things have been so difficult and just hard and painful. Just this really like harsh energy of, you know, just Saturn large and in charge for the last several years. And so I think people are really hungering for kind of some softness and like a little like fantasy, dip your toes in the water and kind of like refill that cup a little bit. And so I think that we're going to see some really interesting outgrowths of those traces.
Well, in that movie too, she eventually learned like to be empowered, like self-empowerment through realizing you know, that she was able to kind of accept the reality of her situation on some level too, through surrender, right? Like that, oh, maybe this baby isn't so bad, and maybe I've misjudged it or something like that too.
And about like making her own choice too, where it's like she doesn't need to subsume herself in something to kind of like get the happy ending that she wants. Like she's going to make her own happy ending because she finds her own like personal power in a way that it's like she's like, I don't need this very sexy Goblin King to like give me the happy ending that I want. That's going in a whole other direction for me. But I just really like that. But yeah, so I think it's kind of about like that self-directed power too, where it's like, you know,
I can't remember the words to that song, so I'm
we'll
gonna make
we'll
you
do the
sing.
sing along at the end. That's
As
for
the
offline.
world falls down.
Yeah, I mean, man, can David Bowie croon?
That is a it's definitely a memorable. I wouldn't call it a bop, but what would you call it? Torch song maybe?
Yeah, very, very sultry.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a weird. The 80s was, yeah. People are like, the mid 80s was a weird time, and it's like, yes, it was. Like,
I think that a good point to bring up is that Jim Henson in particular has some fantastical visions, but also it can be a little bit terrifying when you are exploring the inner recesses of your mind as well. I'm thinking of the Skeksis in the Dark Crystal, the like vulture birds that like probably scarred many a young person in the early 80s, and then like those birds that were jumping around, the firebirds or whatever they were, where their heads would come off, their eyes would pop out, and there was like this really happy song going,
and they're like dancing, and then like their arms like flying
just
off,
horrifying and, like, looking.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, there's the realm of dreams, which I think is very Piscean. I mean, and especially like, you know, with Neptune, like, so you've got this energy of dreams where it can be really beautiful, but also really terrifying. And when things are kind of surreal, it's like kind of amazing and magical, but it can also be really disturbing. And I think we're going to see a lot of that too with that energy. Like, you look at like AI generated images. Like, I think about this a lot. Like, we're just going to see more and more things with that. And it's like, there's this kind of peculiar effect when it tries to generate like a person, and it just makes like all these like extra fingers, and like the hands are like swirly or distorted, and there's just like too many fingers,
or more teeth,
and then like just rows of teeth, like a shark. And it's weird, because one of the ways that you can tell that you're dreaming is to try and like look at your own hands, like in your dream, and your hands won't look right, and that's kind of what they'll look like. They'll be like too many fingers, or it'll be like blurry or shifting, or like you look at your teeth and it's like there's just too many teeth. And it's so peculiar to me that the images of people that AI generates are so dreamlike, because it's like it's just trying to kind of piece together, and it's like there's like some fingers there and some teeth, and like, you get it, you know what I mean. And it's just so interesting that there's that overlap. And I think that
it does feel like we're tapping into that like kind of dream world and dream state on some level.
I think we're going to see more and more of that. Like, this is kind of a really interesting time too.
And Khadijah's pointing out the other bop in that movie.
Magic dance.
Magic dance.
Magic dance. You remind me of the babe. What babe? The babe with the power. What power of voodoo? Voodoo, you do. What? Remind me of the babe.
Yeah, that's
so good.
It's a good one.
So good.
If you haven't seen that movie, go watch it. That'll prepare you for the first decan of Saturn in
Get
Pisces.
ready.
Because that's what it's probably going to be like, just exploring all these.
There's a bog.
There's the bog of eternal stench.
There's a bog of eternal stench.
Yeah. What else in there? There's like a hoggle, like the little there's little
looking
guy.
There's little gnarled beings. Are they friends? Are they foes?
Right. Ludo.
Only time will tell.
You'll get like a large beastly looking dog like figure. Yeah, I don't know. It's fun. It's a fun thing. It is. I would say you can watch it with your kids. Like, I think that, yes, if they're super young, they still might be like, oh, that's scary, but it's not cool. That bad. We turned out all right, didn't we? Debatable, I guess. Another movie that I wanted to touch on and just get your thoughts on, Tanja. So I think that the Piscean decans really tell the story, or are reflected in the story of the Matrix, right? With Neo and his journey from being this kind of automaton in the Matrix, and waking up through dissatisfaction, following the white rabbit, quote unquote, being able to like awaken to a reality where he learns that he can sort of control the previous experience through his intention, through his knowledge and journey of kung fu, and all these things.
It's like a spiritual metaphor. Like, he becomes powerful through controlling his mind and his will and his spirit. I think an important piece of it too is that like the whole thing, like when he takes the, what is it, the red pill?
I don't
He
know.
takes the
One of
red
them.
pill.
Yeah.
So the red pill like wakes him up to like reality. Oh, see, someone's like, yes, this is a movie I know. So yeah, so in it, he's this office drone. He's trying to like find, he feels the sense of dissatisfaction, like something's wrong, something's fake, there's something missing. And so he meets this mysterious dude who's like, take this red pill and it'll show you the truth. And he wakes up and realizes that he's been in this like computer simulation and nothing in his life was real. But the reality that he wakes up into is really like scary and dark. Yeah, that it's like there's no, the world's been destroyed by robots, and so they're like living in like a spaceship, and there's no like food except, it's just like everyone's wearing rags. Like reality is really like sad and kind of like
everyone's
dark.
wearing Kanye's line from
it looks
ago.
like Yeezy, just holes, weird shoes. Looks like they made.
Right.
But then he goes back into the matrix and he becomes this like a demigod because he can see through the nature of the reality. And like in the matrix, everything's very like lavish and like futuristic for the 90s, like, which meant lots of vinyl and like long coats and like those little tiny glasses. So yeah. And I think that's kind of the thing too, where it's like, again, it's that dipping in and out of the dream state. You wake up from the dream into reality that can be like disappointing or dark or, not what you wanted. And then, can you go back in and like take the gold out of it? Like you take the gold out of the mystery and the dreams and the kind of like unreality and somehow find a way to bring that back into the real world and vice versa. So it's that intersection between dream and reality and where that really like interesting hinge of power is. And I think that's part of what's interesting about that story for right now.
Yeah, I think that we're all going to be starting to feel a little bit of like, is this all there is? Like, what? Like, what are we? Are we stuck in the simulation, right? On some level, and those feelings could get a lot stronger. And I'm thinking about some of the music that came out in the last Saturn and Pisces cycle as well, where we saw the kind of the grunge movement and things like that, where people were like feeling pretty, I don't know, a little bit down, a little bit like, I'm just going to reject all of these late stage capitalism tropes and all the excess.
And also hungering for authenticity.
Right.
Like that may be a thing too, is seeing more kind of like analog things, like almost as a reaction against the kind of like strong digital and kind of like dreamy energies. Like people may want something that feels really tactile, that feels really real, that you can like really like touch and smell and get your hands around. And that may be something that people are hungering for at this time too, is like both of those facets, where it's like you want that kind of like really high dream, but also like you want something that feels really real to come back to afterwards.
Sure. Like your magical oils at Third Coast Mojo.
like a beautiful smell. Oh, someone in the chat had a question about if I had any resources about natural perfumery or like ancient recipes for perfume. And I wanted to show this book. This is Essence and Alchemy, A Natural History of Perfume by Mandy Aftel, who's this really like interesting person who does all natural perfume blends. And so in it, she goes really deep into the kind of history of perfumes and kind of how they were originally used for like medicine and magic and like all these other, and food and kind of all these other things, and the kind of like way that perfume twines in with like trade and mysticism and all these other kind of elements. And it's really interesting. There are some recipes in it too, so this is a really nice resource. She actually did a revised 2022 edition that I just got that's really gorgeous. So this is a great book if you're interested in learning more about the history of perfumery and kind of some things like that. So that's a really nice resource. So if anyone's interested, that's something that's on my nightstand right now.
Pretty soon our house is just going to be books and herbs, or just
jars,
just jars,
piles of books and jars, jars on top of the books,
and hoodies,
books on top of the jars,
and hooded sweatshirts will be the
and
other
hoodies around the jars.
Yeah, so
every jar has a hoodie.
So Darren is saying, I love the labyrinth idea you postulated. Everyone seeing all of the various elemental and land spirits in whatever forms their mind perceives them, if only. I like that, Darren. And that's a really great point. Like being able to see the ensoulification of the world, right? We've gotten to a point where sometimes we've become so disconnected with meaning, spirit, and the spirit of the land, the spirit of animals, the spirit of a tree. And that might be something that we start reconnecting with as we move forward in this Piscean time frame as well. So yeah, good point. Elizabeth Roth is saying Essence of Magic, Mary Greer, the oils for the major arcana, probably out of
Ooh,
print. Ooh, that looks like a good one too, Elizabeth. Thank
gonna
you for that
gonna
suggestion.
track that down. That sounds cool.
Okay. Yeah, a couple other people saying they were traumatized by these movies.
It
Tanya.
was
Yeah.
not a time for children.
No. So Tanya, let's take this opportunity to just take a little stretch real quick. Just
Oh
let's
yes.
model some good behavior
Oh yeah.
and stretch it out. Let's take this opportunity to say, if you are liking this video, this live stream, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Please hit that like button, friends. If you want to make a material donation to the work that we do here, you can leave a little super chat or a super sticker with a little $sign in the chat, or you can make a donation at buymeacoffee.com. You can also support the work that we're doing here by either booking a reading with myself. I have all sorts of readings where we can unpack your own personal mythology through the wisdom of the tarot and astrology and the fixed stars and whatnot. Or you can support Tanya's work by purchasing some of her magically elected oils at Third Coast Mojo on Etsy. And of course, sign up for the email lists, plural, to be able to figure out what is coming up next. Okay. Tanya, should we look at a couple more details and kind of move forward with this thing?
Let's do it.
So we've kind of gone over, I think, the essence of Pisces. We've talked about Mercury going through the potential malefic enclosure throughout this lunation cycle. Let's talk a little bit about Jupiter and Venus. Venus is going to be moving into a co-presence with Jupiter and Aries about an hour after the new moon. So we have this like moment, this like peak of Venusian exaltation, very close to her exaltation degree, and then it's like, oh, it's going to shift. How are you seeing this Jupiter and Aries, and then the shift from Venus and her exaltation to her exile in Aries?
Yeah, I was saying earlier, like I feel like that is something that is going to bring kind of like that come down, like you wake up from that dream state and then it's like cold hard reality, or it's like what actions are you going to take? Like, you have this romantic dream and like it's all just kind of out there, and it's like what can you do to kind of like bring that to you? What needs to happen to kind of bring that into the physical, or like what actions do you need to take? Like to me, like Aries is a very active sign. And so like with Venus and Pisces, it can be very passive. So it's very much that kind of like come to me energy where it's like, I'm just a blooming flower and the bees are going to just come to me. Or like, I'm just so beautiful and like my magnetism is going to just bring it to me. But in Aries, you have to kind of like get after it. Like it's get after it o'clock when things start to hit Aries. And I feel like having both benefics there is just going to be a really interesting point in terms of like looking at where that is in your own chart. And like that's going to be an area where it's like you're going to have some real good fortune kind of coming up, but you're going to need to work for it. Like you're going to need to kind of get out and like pursue it and kind of like find out what you want. And then it's time for you to be the one doing the pursuing and getting after it.
Yeah, we are seeing. Okay, if we move the chart forward a little bit, you can see on the outer ring that if we move it forward by a few days, you see that Venus has moved into Aries, and it's getting closer and closer to Jupiter and Aries. We have a few days after the new moon, Mercury making the trine with Mars and then applying to Saturn in that malefic enclosure without a planet breaking it up. Okay, sometimes the moon will break it up a little bit, but I do think there's going to be some challenges with Mercury with that. And then we get to the beginning of the month here, and just another point to make is Mars is still out of bounds throughout this whole period of time. So we've been seeing some arguments, some debates in various forms of the world that have gotten like I don't know if the word's excessive, but they've gotten spicy with Mars out of
Spicy,
bounds, right?
spicy times.
And, there's been a lot of back and forth, and we might be still experiencing that with this new moon with Mars in its out of bounds phase, where it is not really following the rules of engagement that we normally would follow. So when we get into a conflict at this period of time, especially when it's an intellectual conflict, we might be taking it to an extreme or not following the rules of engagement potentially, or something of that nature. So just be careful of that as you move through your day or move through your experience of life. And then we get to like the beginning of March here. What we're looking at right here in this chart is the first quarter moon. So let's talk a little bit about the first quarter moon before we talk about the conjunction of Venus and Jupiter here. So we have the sun at 8 degrees of Pisces and the moon at about 8 degrees of Gemini at our first quarter phase. So Tanja, what do you think about this combination of the 8 of Cups and the 8 of Swords? So I'm going to pull out the 8 of Swords, where we see a figure who is blindfolded and bound. That's a Jupiter-ruled decan. Okay, coming in contact with a Saturn-ruled decan. So we have Jupiter in Gemini. It's exile, right? So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a time when you're just feeling a lot of tension. To me, when I look at that 8 of Swords, like it's just that's a tough one, because it's like you feel trapped, even though like you're not really. Like you could kind of get away if you like put your mind to it, but like there's something that is holding you in place. There's something like probably self-imposed, or like kind of from your limiting beliefs maybe. And when you look at that, like there's that desire to like walk away from something that sucks, or that isn't right anymore. But that 8 of Swords energy is saying like, oh look, no, like you feel stuck for some reason. So I think at this kind of angle, you're hitting this hard angle between those two aspects, and that's going to create that tension where it's like you're trying to walk away, but there's going to feel like there's something that's not letting you, and like that something that's not letting you is probably going to be kind of internal. But I think that's that point where it's like you're going to feel this really hard kind of like tension between your desire to walk away and feeling like there's these constraints around you.
Yeah, I feeling bound by our own, rational mind, maybe a difficulty surrendering to the, I don't know, letting go and letting divine, letting go and letting universe type of experience might be a challenge around that period of time. I'm seeing some comments in the chat, Tanja, about the major arcana essential oils that maybe you need to take up the mantle for making these long extinct things. That sounds like a good idea. We'll have to look into that, huh?
No, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So try not to get too overwhelmed by your thoughts. Again, Pisces is a good time to surrender to maybe, I don't know, the divine having a better plan. I mean, anytime I've had a Piscean experience, it's been related to, surrendering to the process and the current and the flow of my life, rather than trying to control things through my rational mind. I think sometimes you'll see what look like quote unquote mistakes come up, but it's really like a divine course correction. I feel like that's part of the Piscean energy as well. Just being able to see that, if we allow ourselves to be guided, that's really kind of the yin energy, is allowing ourselves to be guided rather than forcing the issue. Which brings me to my next kind of, little oasis here. You can see that we have the conjunction of Venus and Jupiter. This is on March 2nd. Now, this could be really interesting, if not for one particular challenge. So in the midst of a Venus-Jupiter conjunction, which generally should be something pretty positive, and it might be positive. It might be something in the Aries area of your chart at 12 degrees Aries that is, a very nice, beautiful manifestation of your new sense of self, but may also be temporary. And I would say that I wouldn't build your life around what happens around this period of time, because we have a condition in this chart where we see a Hellenistic void of course moon that starts on March the 1st and goes all the way to March the 3rd. And that's a much more rare condition than the modern interpretation of the void of course moon. I believe this is the moon that is not making any aspects for an entire 30 degrees across sign boundaries. Whereas the modern interpretation would be, I think it would reset as we go into a new sign, which makes it a lot more common. So what should we do with this Venus-Jupiter conjunction in the void of course moon time, Tanya?
Well, it looks like Stephen, the Jupiterian, is going to be celebrating his birthday. So I think that's a good thing to do, is just have a nice party. Like, that's a good energy for that. It's to just like have something where it's like you're toasting it up and there's like a celebration, and like maybe you're not like building, the next phase of your empire, but you definitely can kind of acknowledge that this is a beautiful point in the cycle. And like, it doesn't have to last forever. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I think that that's something that would be really good. So happy upcoming birthday. And I think that that's something where it's like, it's a treat. Like, I feel like when the benefics come together, there's always kind of like this really like, it can make kind of like a nice, like some place in your life is going to really flow like a little bit. Like, there may be other things where it's kind of a mess and it might not last, but there'll be like kind of a nice little moment where it's like, you can exhale a little bit, and there's going to be something that's like a nice treat that day.
Yeah,
treat yourself.
I think also just be careful with Venus moving through Aries as well, just because Venus is the energy of receptivity often, although it does have a morning star phase, and we can debate that, but generally when Mars is in Aries, a Mars ruled sign, we tend to pursue things that we'd be better off allowing to come to us. So I think that you have to be careful of being overly pursuant of your desires around this period of time, because that could blow up into something much bigger. You'll have to like take away my Amazon like membership like access during this time, so that I'm not just like,
you're denied. No more hoodies. No more
hoodies around this period of time. So yeah, just enjoy whatever comes up without trying to overdo it. And don't build your entire life around what comes up around this period of time, because it might be something that's a little bit more temporary, and it might not be able to take root because of the void, of course, with the moon as well. All right, so let's see if there's anything else that we need to look at in the chart. Tanya, let's go to the full moon. What do you say?
All righty.
So we're going to just take this forward to the full moon and give you a little bit of insight potentially into what the fruition of this cycle might be looking like. So this is, what's the date on there, Tanya? Let me see here.
March 7th.
Okay, so on March 7th, and I just had one of the screens was in the way there, sorry. On March the 7th, we're going to see an opposition of the sun and the moon and the fruiting of this particular new moon cycle. Now, this is a really important day astrologically for a number of reasons. Yes, we have a full moon, but we also have the day that Saturn is going to move into Pisces. So you can see that Saturn's at the very last degrees of Aquarius here, and about to move into Pisces. We also have Mercury has already moved into Pisces, which is hosting this full moon. So already we're dealing with a state of potential
so much Pisces.
Yes, maybe confusion with Mercury and Pisces. Maybe we're, feeling a lot more metaphorical, figurative language-wise, or we're wanting to escape our current realities. But that that Virgo moon is going to try to ground us in some kind of reality, and ground us in some kind of detail, really show us what is necessary to bring our dream into form. I really think that second decan of Pisces, which is related to the 9 of Pentacles in the Decanic system, is really about infusing spirit into matter. And so this might be the fruition of that dream. but I think it's important to check all the details twice with this one. What are you seeing here with this full moon here?
Yeah, I love what you just said there, but I would also say that when I see a configuration like this, and you've got this Virgo moon that's just trying so hard to like bring details and bring kind of this concreteness in, but it's being provided for by that like double detrimented Mercury. Like
Right.
Mercury just struggles so much in Pisces, and also having Neptune there kind of adds this other element of this like just like hazy, like it's confusing, it's this fog, like where it's like what's real, what's happening. And so like there's going to be that drive to like get those details right, but it's going to be an uphill battle, I think. Like, what the moon is, the materials that the moon has to work with is going to be very Piscean-y, like very like muddy, where it's just like, oh, like what's it all mean, like where's my keys, where's my shoe, like.
We do have a trine between the moon and Uranus, though, so maybe there's some innovation
Yeah,
that
and it
comes
may be,
through
yeah,
this.
like that's the thing. There may be a surprising outcome. Like the thing about like Pisces with Mercury in it to me is like, yes, it's like this is kind of a uniquely challenging situation for a planet because it's both it's fall and detriment. So it's just like it's really challenged. But also like you see people with this placement who are poets, who are artists, like so it can provide this really kind of unusual perspective. So it'll be a really unconventional kind of thing where it's like you're seeing things and it's like it's you're going to just be looking at things in a way that like other people wouldn't, like,
Right.
and it's going to go at its own speed, it's going to come to its own conclusions, but that can be really fertile too. So it's not just all bad. Like it's definitely a situation where it's like it can be challenging, like if you're trying to like do your taxes maybe, but it could also be a really amazing time for kind of inspiration or like some kind of really unconventional view on something just coming to light in an interesting way.
Taxes is interesting, isn't it? Like we're going to
Mm-hmm.
be heading into tax season with a Mercury in Pisces under the beams of the sun, which is
Mm-hmm.
another challenging position for Mercury. And
Mm-hmm.
Taria was kind of echoing what you were saying, Tanya, about seeing things from another perspective when a planet is in exile or fall, and which I agree
Definitely,
with. Like it's,
definitely.
traditionally, they would talk about that planet not being able to do things in the way that would be socially acceptable. So maybe you just have a completely different way of doing something. And if that works for you, then that's great. Sometimes that can be very fertile, like you're saying. Sometimes it can make things extra challenging if you're trying to do things in a way that's completely outside of the normal way of doing something. Um, yeah, I think that. Oof, when is it safe to do our taxes again, Tanya? This is the question I have here.
Oh
What's the
man.
tax due date? 15th? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
something like that. I mean, I
So
think like
let's
just
see.
just take your,
Okay,
take
here.
your time,
I've got a day for you.
check it once, check it twice.
You've got oh no, shit. So that's during the void of course moon. Well, you're screwed. We're all screwed here. So I think that let's see, when does
I mean,
Mercury move into Aries?
American taxes are like intensely confusing, like
Yeah.
almost intentionally, like willfully obtuse, like
So
that
we'll
it's like,
have a
what are your taxes? It's a
Kazemi.
surprise.
Well, the Kazemi of Mercury in Pisces on the 17th, March 17th, and
Mhm.
then Mercury moves into Aries on March 19th. I think you're probably safe to go do your taxes like March 19th or so. Although that's cutting it pretty close to the deadline.
Yeah,
So,
gather your materials,
what I
check
will
it
say
once, check
is
it twice.
Mercury in Pisces is amazing for poetry and art. Is it amazing for doing your taxes? Probably not. Check things twice. Make sure that you have someone look at it. Like, check all the details because it could be really easy to miss something that might cause a headache later on.
Do you have a friend who's a Virgo?
Yeah, like everyone send your taxes to Lynn over here, our
That's
resident
right.
Virgo. Never
That's
look at
right.
them. All right. Anything else that we're seeing that we're missing here? I think we've pretty much gotten a good overview. Would you say?
Ooh.
Okay, Tanya, let's wrap this thing up. We
All
have
right.
gone on a journey. We've gone down into the labyrinth. We've gone into the
we've
matrix.
we've flown through the matrix.
We
We've wallowed in the bog of stench.
oh god, the eternal stench. Goodness. So I do have some final divination for all of you today. As we do, we pull an I-Ching reading for the lunation and an animal. So I got the I-Ching reading I got was number 32, which translates to endurance, constancy, perseverance, long lasting. And line number 2 is the only changing line that changes us to hexagram number 62. So we'll talk about that in a second. But line number 2 says, regrets vanish. So that's it. Regrets vanish. So
Good.
there we go.
We did it, guys.
Yay. so this changing line speaks to maintaining equilibrium, avoiding extremes, doing just enough, using just enough force to be able to move something in the right direction, which feels very Piscean to me, right? Where it's, we don't want to force the issue. We don't want to swim against the current. We're doing just enough to keep things going so we can get to the spring equinox and the new blooming of the seed above ground or something of that nature. So try not to do too much. Don't try too hard or push it. Perseverance demands inner strength. This is, I think, one of the great gifts of Pisces is this. If you've known a Piscean in your life, my goodness, they have an emotional strength when called upon, when in the right situation. That is really remarkable, and they can be very self-sacrificing for the right cause and really can power you through to the other side. So draw upon that inner strength. Try to stay calm and wait for the spring. Apply just enough force to move things forward. And then that leads us to hexagram number 62, Tanya, where it's called exceeding smallness, conscientiousness, keeping a low profile, reining in your ambitions, paying attention to the details, a bird that flies close to the ground rather than flying too high where they can lose their song. So thoughts and reflections on that hexagram reading, the I-Ching reading that we have here, anything that's popping up for you?
I mean, I think the thing about all those things is that to me, it's always kind of about balance, that it's like, it feels like the I-Ching is always just like, hey, the middle path, guys. You know what's super cool? Not getting too high, not getting too low. You know what's super great? Going with the flow. Yeah. And which I think is always a really great kind of message, especially around this time of year, like to just kind of like put down some of the sticks and like, you know, take some time to kind of like go within and to kind of like try and find that balance in yourself.
Yeah. We've got some really interesting comments here, Tanya, about sending your taxes to your Virgo friends.
Oh, yeah.
I send my taxes to my Virgo stepmom to look at.
It's a good friend.
That's a good point. And also
six planets in Virgo.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, wow. Darren, or D, our resident Piscean son here, says we can be very self-sacrificing for the wrong cause as well. So yes, make sure that the cause is worthy if you're
that's a great
trying
point.
to go through something that requires that inner strength and that sacrifice, because oftentimes we can fall prey to people who would take advantage of us because of our sensitivity if you have Piscean placements.
Yeah. Choose your battles wisely. Choose your friends wisely.
Lynn says, I can write a nice poem for you about taxes or a letter to the IRS about why you didn't file.
There we go.
That's funny.
Will the IRS accept this interpretive dance?
As the world comes down.
See, that'd be me doing my taxes. It'd just be like, here, hang on a second, and it's like someone like screaming in the background and like playing the bongo drums while I'm just like, this is how I feel about my taxes.
Something from line number 63 to file in time.
That's right. There we go.
All right.
Put on my my cod piece.
Or have that little ball that wasn't actually his hand. Like
contact juggling. It's called contact juggling. Where
he'd have like the crystal, and he's like, I'm gonna drop this, and it's gonna.
No one knows what we're talking about. We gotta keep it moving.
You gotta watch the Labyrinth, okay?
Someone was saying that we should have like a watch party. We should
do
a Labyrinth watch party at some point.
I would very much enjoy that. That would be very fun. Okay, so the animal that we got for this lunation was the bee. And the bee, in the research that comes out of this exploration, talks about accomplishing an impressive task. They are very productive little creatures. It talks about fertility, productivity, but also the danger of becoming too busy. It encouraged us to stop and rest, and or conversely, if we've been procrastinating, to get moving. Bees are very organized, and sometimes we have to stop and enjoy the fruits of our labors. Maybe that's the Venus Jupiter, in Aries conjunction. Maybe just enjoying yourself, right?
Little moment of sweetness.
Do you have any bee facts for us?
Eat some honey out of the jar. Yeah. I was thinking about this. I had the pleasure of going to visit someone who keeps bees a little while ago, in the before times, back when I did such things. And it's just, they're amazing little creatures. Like they devote their whole lives to this one very specific task. And I think it kind of goes back to that, like, pick your battles, where it's just like, the amazing thing about bees is that they're just so focused. They're focused on, like, the care of their hive. They're focused on gathering the pollen and making honey. And like a single bee, like, they work their whole life and they make this like teeny amount of honey, but it's that teeny amount of honey that's going to like sustain their hive and provide this sweetness and nourishment that's going to last their colony through the winter. And it's interesting too, when you think about how queens are made. They're fed a specific type of food that like transforms them into like this fertile being, like the only member of the entire hive that is fertile. And so it's like, you have to think about what you're nourishing yourself with. Like, this is a time when it's like, if you're feeding yourself on kind of nourishing, beautiful, strengthening things, you can kind of have that fertility come to flourish in yourself. And I think that that's something that's so important too.
Maybe that's a good symbol for us, Tanya, to get moving on our pollinator habitat plans.
That's right. That's right.
We've got a friend here from Portland, Katie, who does pollinator garden stuff and makes some really amazing home crafted products as well. So
love it.
Katie, we'll be getting in contact with you. Give us some good advice on the pollinator habitat plans.
Look for our communication.
Yeah. All right.
Yes, and Lynn's saying that bees communicate through interpretive dance, which they do.
There you go.
They talk by dancing, and that's how we're all going to do our taxes, people.
So everybody recreate the Labyrinth ballroom scene, do an interpretive dance.
That's right.
Get your own David Bowie cod pieces and tights and Tina Turner hair with your little party mask, and you'll be ready to go.
That's right.
All right. We've gone on quite a journey today, Tanya. I would call you my friend, but I'll call you my love for this one here today. So
romantic.
Well, thank you, my love. So thank you, friends, for joining us here today. Do you have anything else you want to direct people towards, Tanya, to support you or whatnot?
No, just I would say sign up for my mailing list, check out my offerings. And just, get in touch with me if you have questions. I love talking about what I do, and I'm really looking forward to making some custom blends for people or connecting people with ways that they can make their own magic in their lives.
Nice. And follow Tanya at Third Coast Mojo on Instagram, or at Tanja Andrews with a J, and sign up for her mailing list. She's got a lot of really good stuff going on. She's very talented at what she does. I am biased, but I think that many people who have come across her work and her out in the world would say the same. So, friends, do me a favor before you leave today. Please hit the like button on this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and try to take a break. Maybe this is the permission that you need to just relax and not force the river. There'll be plenty of times for, going off and grinding away, but Pisces season, take a little bit of chill pill, like go watch a movie, go watch David Bowie in the Labyrinth, go
have
throw
a dance
on
party.
Matrix, have a dance party, have some honey or some royal jelly or something, and become your own queen bee, right? All right. Well, friends, that is what I have for you today. It's been so wonderful sharing space with you, Tanya, and it has been wonderful sharing this time with all of you, friends. So remember just to be kind to one another, be kind to yourself, try to avoid some of the major conflicts out there in the world if you can, and kindness is always a great way to carry yourself throughout the world. Oftentimes things can be resolved just through appreciating one another and having gratitude. So that's what I've got for you today, friends. We will see you the next time. All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.